Some of us aren't leading without our parents. We're leading after losing them. And that's a different kind of leadership. So let's talk about it because it doesn't come from mentorship, it comes from absence. No one really talks about that part. I think people assume leadership is something you grow into, that someone shows you, guides you, teaches you how to make all these decisions. But for some of us, that didn't happen. For some of us, leadership started the moment we realized there's no one to call anymore. I still remember that time when, after my mom passed, I grabbed the phone to try to dial her cell phone number. I was driving home from a work meeting and I didn't even think about it. It just was an automatic for me that I would always call her. And this time I had to tell myself she was no longer here. No one to run things by, no one to say, hey, you're doing right, or fix this or change this. No one to catch you if you fall. And when you lose your parents, you don't just lose people. For me, I lost reference points. You lose the place where you've gone to ask questions like, what should I do next? What do you think about this? How am I showing up here? See, for me, my parents were also that. And so you start making decisions, not because you feel ready, but because you have to. There's no option. That's a different kind of pressure, friends. That's not ambition. That's responsibility. And people will look at you and say, my goodness, you're so strong. I don't know how many times I've heard that. But strength isn't always what it looks like from the outside. Sometimes strength is just you didn't have another option. So you had to make the decision and you had to go that direction. You learned how to move forward while still carrying all these questions that honestly don't have answers anymore because you don't have your parents, because you can't really call them. And here's what shifts, because if you're not careful, you'll keep leading from that place, the place of pressure, the place of survival, from I have to figure things out alone. And it is a very hard place to be in. I remember losing my mom to ovarian cancer, and the entire journey was very difficult for my sister and I. But then 18 months later or so, I lost my father. And I had not even grieved my mom before I had to grieve my dad. And all of these emotions kept coming up. But see, I was raised in survival. And I remember that I would tell myself, I can do this. I can do this. I have to get up. I have to wake up. I have to lead. I have to do this. At the same time, I was working and I was being a mom and I was leading, and I had all these meetings that I had to go speak to and stand in front of the stage and inspire people. And yet I was going through a time in my life where I needed to be inspired. But because I was so used to always surviving, I kept going. Leadership shouldn't be built on survival because it gets heavy, very heavy, really fast. And eventually you have to ask yourself, am I leading because I'm still trying to cope or because I'm choosing how I want to show up? We tend to hide sometimes what we feel and the voids that we have, especially as first generation leaders. We were raised in environments where we had to figure it out, where our emotions, at least for me, sometimes were suppressed and you didn't have anywhere to go or anyone to ask. And that's fine. You just had to keep going. And so now, as someone that has gone through a lot of life challenges, when losing your parents, you try to also suppress that feeling and continue and keep leading. But see, losing your parents changes you. There's no way around that. But it also forces you to become something before you feel ready. And maybe the work now is learning how to lead on purpose, not just out of necessity. I don't think we talk enough about this, friends. I don't think we talk enough about leading without your parents, leading without having anybody to call, leading after losing them and hurting and feeling all the sadness and continuing to go. What it means to lead when the people you've learned from aren't there. I remember I told a friend of mine a while ago, it's really hard to be a mom without a mom. And I don't want to get into the details of my relationship with my parents, long story short, they divorced when I was 4 and I went to live with my father. Fast forward to my 20s, my mom and I became roommates and God restored our relationship and we became better together. And God allowed me to be with her at an age in my life where I needed her, but it wasn't always perfect. My parents weren't perfect, but they did show me and teach me a lot of things. I always tell family members nothing is lost if you learn something from it. And that applies to everything. It applies to work, it applies to relationships, it applies to everything. If you learn something from it, it's not lost. So, as I began to have a relationship with my mom, even in my older years, and when she was diagnosed with ovarian cancer, she was only able to be here for 9 months after her diagnosis. She had a very aggressive case of ovarian cancer. And those were the times where I believe we thought about time and we thought about the things that matter a lot more. Sometimes we get so caught up in this thing of leading and being and showing up for others that we forget the things that really, really matter. And at the end of the day, that's what really matters, what you spend your time in, what you do with the loved ones. And something as simple as putting our phones down when people that we love and care about are around us. When I took a few leadership roles and I was invited to sit on boards, I remember it was during the time where my mom had been given months to live. And I remember I had to turn that down and say, I want to enjoy the time with my mom because I know she's not going to be here anymore. And then I lost her. And then I took on these roles as a leader, influence others, and I became to get really involved in church. And I started taking all these leadership roles, and there was still those times where I would grab the phone and I would want to call her and I would want to ask her things, and still till this day. But no one really talks about that part of leadership, about being a leader and losing your parents and not having that support, regardless of your relationship with your parents. We need that in our lives. At least I needed that in my life. If this helped you in any way, subscribe, comment, share. I'm going to do a part 2 of this. A lot of you have been asking me about my story, and there's so much to it. But this one, I believe, is an important part because there's so many of you that have lost your parents and are leading in spaces and places that perhaps sometimes you miss them. You need that support, and nobody really talks about that. See, not everyone is where you are. Not everyone is where I am, but it's hard to lead when you don't have your parents. It's hard to lead when you don't have that reference point. So stay tuned for part 2. Subscribe, share, comment, and I'll see you next time. Bye.